Hey all, it's Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis. It is October 24th in the afternoon, as usual, and the temperature is a nice, balmy 60 degrees. We got down to 50 last night. So today's video will be, I'll touch a little bit about some of the cooler weather and cold weather by our standards. But more importantly, I've got some blooms to show you. But first of all, before I jump into that, I want to say I checked out my YouTube analytics, and I've noticed that about half, or a little less than half of the folks watching these videos are not subscribed. So I would encourage all of you, if you find these videos useful, please do subscribe and hit that like button. But back to the important stuff. So there are times, I've mentioned in other videos that, keeping temperatures above 55 degrees is sort of the minimum that you want if you are going to keep your roots wet over winter. For some reason, people like to water their Catasetums over winter. I don't get it, but whatever. If you do that, keep your temperatures above 55 degrees. So some of you might be thinking, hey, if your roots are wet and it gets below 55, what happens? Well, last night, we got down to about 50 degrees, and this night, tonight, it won't be quite as cold. Early next week, Monday, Tuesday, will be down in the 40s. So I'll be getting all these guys behind me into the greenhouse this weekend, and I'll be heating it during that period. However, if your plants are actively growing and it's like a 1 or 2 night kind of a deal where the roots are wet, the plant is actively growing, and the temperatures are going to be 50 degrees, it shouldn't be a problem for a healthy plant. It's really once you get into dormancy and the roots are wet and things get cold, that's when your plants are going to start to rot. And just sort of an aside, these guys, the Catasetums, when they're dormant, they can handle temperatures briefly close to freezing. But it's not something that you want to do repeatedly, so maybe do it by accident, once or twice a winter, if you can keep it to that few occurrences. But the roots need to be dry, bone dry, and that's sort of another reason to keep your plants dry during dormancy. They don't need water at all unless they really start to shrivel, and B, if you do accidentally get cold temperatures around your plants, and there's even a drop of moisture and the temperatures get below 55, there's a much higher chance that your plant will die. So again, I really like to hammer home, just keep them dry all winter. I don't understand why anybody would want to water a plant that doesn't need water, but it is what it is. Anyway, let's get to the fun stuff. Clowesetum Dragon's Gem Cardrona is a plant that I got, a bunch of years ago from a friend online. I'm pretty active on Orchid Board, which is this forum. This is where, online orchid nerds used to go to chat before Facebook suddenly had a bunch of hobby groups, and sort of everybody goes over there now. But, I still post a lot over there. And a friend of mine over there, Katrina, she had a division of this. She sent me a big fat bulb, and it's just, this thing just grows and grows and grows. And so this spring, I chopped it up, and I'll show you some pictures here, but I chopped it up into a lot of different pieces. This is actually the same plant from my very first video, the very first PET video that I did like a year and a half ago, I guess. And I can link to that. Actually, no, I won't link to that. I feel like my PET method has improved, as have my video, so there's no reason to watch that. But importantly, I'm just sort of yammering on here, and you guys want to see the flowers. So let me pour out the water that is trapped in the bottom of this well so it doesn't leak all over my pants as I'm showing this to you. And so for most of the time I've had this particular plant, it's typically bloomed, in that sort of January, February time frame, which comes from the Clowesetum parents. And several of the Cloaceas, for example, all the Cloaceas in the background of Cloacea Rebecca Northern, they're going to bloom in that sort of dead of winter time. There's a whole group of other Cloaceas that look very different, and they bloom in the summer. And those guys, I don't think are in the background of this one. But anyway, I tell you that story because for some reason, whatever reason it is, this one blooms typically twice a year for me now. About this time of year, and then it'll bloom again in February. So this is the one that's actually blooming. The spike, I should say, that's actually blooming. Got another spike over here, and at least one more up here. I don't know if you can see where my fingers are, and I'm touching this and making cracking sounds. I hope I didn't break that. But this is a very fragrant flower, although not right now. I think the overcast skies have really reduced the scent. Normally this is powerfully fragrant, and you can see beautiful flowers, really big actually, you know. I think it gets a lot of the qualities of a bunch of its parents. Also of note, let me see if I can lift back the bangs here, the leaves, and you can see this. If you look at the top flowers, maybe you can see that one in the back that's faded. For some reason, there's some bug that's getting into my Clowesetums, and I think it's fertilizing them, or at least it's taking the pollen. Let me pop this flower off here and show you. And there's a couple of them, and we can explore it together. So you can see not only is something getting in there, but it's eating the blooms, which is kind of annoying. And as I peel the lip back here, I'm going to hold it back so it doesn't get too fuzzy. Hopefully it shows up. So if you take the lip off, oops, just kind of rip the whole thing apart. Take the lip off, you get this stigma, which is where the pollen is. So typically, let's see if this will show up. Typically you'll have pollinia that are yellow in the front here, and that's all been removed as some bug was rummaging around in there. But you know, when you grow outside, these are the things that you have to deal with. It's typically not like aphids and mealy bugs that get me out here. It's large bugs that aren't being feasted on by the birds and by you know, I've got a whole army of anole lizards that are just eating up all the small bugs, but the big ones are able to get through. But nonetheless, we still get to enjoy blooms like this, and of course these other spikes, and here's another spike that I didn't point out before. And let's see if I can show you some roots on this. It looks like they're mostly buried. I've got some, it looks like aerial roots, which is kind of interesting, down here at the bottom. And I did not use sphagnum in this PET pot. I used all bark. I'm not going to use sphagnum anymore because it clogs up too quickly. I can't get water through a lot of my sphagnum balls, and it's not because the sphagnum dries out because it's wet all the time. I water them every day. It's actually because the roots sort of create this mesh, and then the sphagnum on top, they sort of combine. They're conspiring against me. So I will no longer use sphagnum in my PET method. And I think this spring I'm going to make a new PET video talking about some of these changes that I've been dealing with over the past couple of years of using the PET method. But anyway, that's my Clowesetum Dragon's Treasure Cardrona. I always call it Dragon's Gem. I don't know why. I'm going to show you a few things in bud as well, really quickly. So hold on. So I'm going to show you 3 or 4 plants real quick that are in bud. This is Catasetum maculatum. As you can see, this particular spike is probably as long as my forearm here. This is maybe the 5th blooming on this one, and you can see how fat this giant bulb is. This is also one of the ones that I mentioned. As you can see, the roots are drier than I want because they're just packed in here and it's sphagnum on top. So I need to get this one into a larger pot. I'm going to chop it up and sell pieces, I think, in the spring, but I also need to get it into a bigger pot. Another one that you can see growing is Catasetum fong sing. I'm not going to get way back in there until it blooms. That I got from my friend William Green, and it's only got one spike for me. He got 2 last year, so I think maybe it likes his conditions better. We'll see. We'll see how they look when they come out. I've also got another spike on this Clowesetum by Tenebrosum here. This is probably one of my favorite blooms. You know, if I lost all of these plants, I think I'd be the saddest about this one and maybe 1 or 2 others. Over here I have a Cycnoches cooperi, which has a couple things that I want to point out, actually. So it's got these 2 spikes that are coming out, and they look great. Hopefully there'll be a sort of a long chain of black or dark brown mahogany flowers. But you can see the color, the stripes here on the leaves have